Hey y'all, welcome to reality. I'm sure just like all of y'all, we've all come from really busy weeks, and I hope that y'all can just sit down just like us and join us in some worship and an amazing teaching from Scott. Join us now. Good job. Desperate for your touch, a glimpse of heaven through the glory of your Son. In a moment you can turn a life around, forever to be found in you. And I'm reaching out to find, there's nothing greater than your love that holds my life. Your grace and mercy that has saved me by your blood and swept away my shame, oh Lord. Your love is like fire, it burns for all to see. My only desire to worship at your feet. So let this fire consume my life. Let your love take me deeper. Draw me closer where you are. 'Cause all I want is more of you. Surrender to your love, forever humbled by the message of the cross. I stand abandoned in your presence and embrace. I'll never be the same, oh God. Your love is like fire that burns for all to see. My only desire to worship at your feet. So let this fire consume my life. Let your love take me deeper. Draw me closer to where you are. 'Cause all I want is more of you. When you go, I will follow. At the cross I surrender all. Jesus, I belong to you. Let your love take me deeper. Draw me closer to where you are. 'Cause all I want is more of you. When you go, I will follow. At the cross I surrender it all. Jesus, I belong to you.
so glad you joined us, and we hope you enjoyed our time of praise and worship. And just prepare your hearts for what the Lord has in store for you to hear. With Scott's teaching, he's continuing the study of changes that heal. If you have prayer requests or praises, please share those in the comments with us, or feel free to private message us. We also have now online giving. If you would like to give to help our ministry, it will go for technology equipment so we can bring you better service online. There will be in the comments section that link for you. We are so glad you joined us, and tomorrow at 12 we will be doing our Zoom discussion. So just prepare your hearts for what the Lord has in store to teach you through Scott tonight.
Thanks, Penny. And thanks, worship team. Thank you so much. And Emily, thanks for all the technical stuff that you're doing over there that makes me look better than I really am. So anyway, thank you for joining. Welcome, everyone. So glad that you are joining us for this time of worship and Bible study. It means a lot to us, and we're hoping that what we give, what we provide, what we share with you is meaningful for you, and in some way God uses to bring benefit to your life. We are doing a series of teachings on this book right here, Changes That Heal. I'm covering some of the chapters. I'm not covering everything in the book. I recommend the book. The book has been around for some time, but it is a really, really good book. And so I do recommend it. It's by Changes That Heal by Dr. Henry Cloud. And very, very good book. We've been looking at it and sharing some things from it, hoping that it would be a good benefit to you. I always say as I start, I've never done anything like this before, so I always say it could be a beautiful disaster or it could be a successful failure. I'm not real sure which it might be, but it's always a dangerous risk to see what's going to happen as we share tonight. I want you to know that the premise of the book is Dr. Cloud makes the argument that the more we become like Jesus, the healthier we become, and then vice versa. The less we are like Jesus, the less healthy we are. And when we make changes with God's help, we become more like Him, then we begin to experience healing in the places that we are broken. In this book, what he did with his book is he highlighted 4 changes for us to do. And these are the changes. Build bonds with others like Jesus did. Healthy bonds, healthy connections. Establish healthy boundaries from others like Jesus did. Develop acceptance of good and bad. And then move towards maturity. And all of those we can see in Jesus' life. And when we choose to make those kinds of changes, then healing comes to us as well. Now, we've talked about bonding already. We've talked about boundaries. And so tonight what we're going to do is we're going to talk about sorting out good and bad. Now, I got to pause right here and say I really struggled with this section of the book. And I think it's because I struggle with the topic of sorting out good and bad. So great, give me grace tonight. Struggle with me as we wrestle with some of this material, and we'll see where it goes and what kind of benefit that God may cause it to have for us. Life has a way of teaching us that everything is divided between 2 categories: good or bad. There are good guys and there are bad guys. It's what makes a good movie. There are good things and there are bad things. And with this, an unspoken goal begins to be created as we are taught this, where we try to get rid of all that is bad while preserving all that is good. Over time, this can become what is called black and white thinking where there is no gray. There is either good or bad, there is nothing in between. Life is either all good or all bad. Now, in this movement, I am and you are either all good or all bad, all good or no good at all, is another way to say that. And so there's this movement that life sort of pushes us to make a choice between good and bad, to get rid of all the bad that we can, to hold on to all the good we can. It's almost like all or nothing thinking, black and white with no gray. In my relationship with Diana, I always wanted to be her knight in shining armor. But early in our marriage, if I made a mistake or I messed up somehow, or she expressed some criticism, I became, in my mind, this total failure. I was this worthless mess up that had no right to take up space on the earth. I was either all good or all bad. Now, slowly, over time, I had to learn that the truth was I was not either good or bad, that I was good and bad. We have this natural tendency to try to resolve problems with good and bad by keeping good and bad separated. We want good to be all good and we want bad to be all bad. And this creates a split in life which results in an inability to tolerate anything bad like failure or weakness or loss. We begin to believe we ourselves as well as others are all bad when there is a failure, or all good when everything is doing well. And this often leads to two problems. One, denying the existence of bad. If bad exists, I don't want to see it. And then sometimes it leads to the other extreme of the other end of the continuum, denying the existence of good. I'm so bad, there is no good in me. Dr. Cloud says this: if we do not have the ability to tolerate and deal with the simultaneous existence of good and bad, we cannot successfully deal with and live in this world, for the world and we are precisely that, good and bad. Jesus, whom we want to be like, viewed those around him as good and bad, not good or bad. Look with me at a scene from his life in Luke chapter 7, starting with verse 36. Luke chapter 7, starting with verse 36. I'm going to read it to you. It's 36 to the end of the chapter, which is verse 50. Now, as we go through this scene, listen for good and bad, or good or bad. Where either it's the view of someone in the story is it's either good or it's bad. It can't be both. Or the view that Jesus has where there's good and bad. And just try to listen for it as we go through it. When one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, so she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. Now, let me stop here. Pharisee, you ought to be thinking really good. Woman who lived a sinful life, you should be thinking really bad. As she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears, and then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. When the Pharisee who had invited Jesus saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman, bad, she is, that she is a sinner. And Jesus answered him, Simon, notice Jesus knew his thoughts. Simon, I have something to tell you. Tell me, teacher, he said. 2 people owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he forgave the debts of both. Now, which of them will love him more? And Simon replied, I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven. You have judged correctly, Jesus said. And then he turned toward the woman and said to Simon, do you see this woman? Now, I think that's a real interesting question that Jesus is asking, because it's possible that Simon had not seen the woman. He had noticed her presence, but he hadn't really looked at her. Do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman from the time I entered has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven little, loves little. And then Jesus said to her, your sins are forgiven. And the other guests began to say among themselves, who is this who even forgives sins? And Jesus said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. Simon, a Pharisee, sees himself as the epitome of what God would call good. And like any Pharisee would. In that day and time, Pharisees were considered the best people in the culture. The goodest people, if you want to use bad English there. But Simon, he's not in touch with how he is like the woman who shows love to Jesus. He has no idea how he might be like her. And this is the point. If we don't learn to live with good and bad, so sorry, wait a minute. Maybe I missed some of my notes here. Yes, I did. So sorry. He's not in touch with how he is like the woman who is loving on Jesus. Now, in Simon's world, he is all good and she is all bad. You see that point, okay? Thus the statement in verse 39. Did you catch it in verse 39? Where Simon is looking at her and he says this. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know who's touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner. See, he sees that she's all bad and that he's all good. So Simon's world is either good or it is either bad. Now Jesus sees good and bad. For Simon, who is a Pharisee, someone who works very hard to be good, what Jesus does then is points out some of his bad. Like his hospitality was terrible. And hospitality in that culture was a very sacred thing. And for the woman who obviously has practiced some bad, Jesus points out some good. This obviously created some problems for Simon. Obviously it did. And this is the point. This is where I was trying to get to. If we don't learn to live with good and bad, not good or bad, we will have a hard time living in this world. When we swing back and forth from seeing things either all good or all bad, we will not have a healthy relationship with ourselves, with others, or the world around us. Because the truth is, ourselves, others, and the world around us is both good and bad. What most often happens when a person is stuck in an either-or mentality is that they go from friend to friend, spouse to spouse, church to church, job to job, and so forth. They're looking for all good. In other words, they're looking for perfection. But when bad shows up and they can't get rid of it, what was thought to be good is now going to be rejected, and the search for perfection continues. Now, beloved, this search for perfection sets up this battle that begins to take place within over what is ideal and what is really real. Of course, the ideal is what we want. It is better than what is real, hands down. It works better, it looks better, it is admired by almost everyone, and it has less problems and heartache than what is real. There's one flaw in it. There's one flaw in the ideal. It's just not real. Life, real life, cannot sustain it. It might exist for a short while. We might be able to generate the ideal for a little bit, but real life will not be able to sustain it. Real life can't sustain it because what is real includes all the ways that we are not like Jesus. All the weaknesses and all the brokenness and all the unhealthiness that life that is not Jesus-like brings with it. Now, this coexistence of the real and the ideal can go one of two ways. One, it can set up this war that can be declared between the real and the ideal. The real and ideal go to war, try to judge and condemn and deny or hide the other into non-existence. Either I just deny and hide the real and play like I live in the ideal, or I do the opposite. I live in the real and play like the ideal doesn't exist. I work at this. This war sets up and works at this, that at least into some kind of making the other very, very small in my life or not even acknowledged. But that's one way. That's one way that this coexistence of the real or ideal goes. But here's the other way. A mentality of acceptance and love can be adopted between the real and the ideal, where grace is given to both of them, the real and the ideal. The first way, where there's war, that stunts growth. The second way, where there is grace for the real and the ideal and the relationship between them, that encourages growth. The first way builds barriers to healing and wholeness because there's war going on. There's a conflict going on. The second one, where there's grace and acceptance, promotes healing and wholeness. The first way makes us less like Jesus. We're in turmoil. We're in conflict between what is really real and what is ideal. The second way, where there's acceptance and grace of both, makes us more like Jesus. Now, just for a second, I want to pause and comment on what we imagine the ideal to be like before we go any further. There is this dealing that we have to do between the real and the ideal. Are we going to fight them? Are we going to fight what is real and fight what is ideal? Are we going to go to war over these two, or are we going to learn how to live in acceptance? But let me pause just for a moment and talk a little bit about the ideal. And there's a caution here that I want to give. What some people imagine the ideal to be has really nothing to do with what God says is the ideal. Let me try to give you an example so that you understand what I'm saying. I know many men who believe that the ideal male is someone who never shows emotions. That's their ideal. Well, Jesus fails that test. He showed emotions. Any idea that fails Jesus cannot be ideal. Whatever our idea of perfect is, whether it comes from our family dynamics growing up or our own wishes and wants, if it's going to be true and not fake, it has to fit Jesus. We need to be humble about our picture of perfection and let Jesus shape it and inform it. Even our ideas about Jesus himself needs to be humbly held and tested with biblical reflection and understanding. We deal with the conflict between the real and the ideal in 4 different ways, 3 of which always fail. one which is successful. Here's how we deal with the conflict. One is we deny the bad in our lives. In other words, the bad we see in ourselves and others we deny. We don't want to look at it. We ignore it, hoping that it'll go away. That's one way. The other way that we deal with this conflict is we deny, is a denial of the good in our lives. The good we see in ourselves and others, we deny. We just say it's not there. I know some people that I have had conversations with that they feel like they are such a bad person that there's no way good could exist in them. That's a denial of the good. So there's the denial of the bad, there's the denial of the good. These are the ways that we deal with this conflict. The third way is by attacking and judging and condemning the bad that we see in ourselves and that we see in others. We think by attacking it, criticizing it, judging it, condemning it, we can do away with it or change it to something good. And it never works. The final way that we deal with this conflict is the only way that works, and that is acceptance of both good and bad. This is the biblical approach, actually. It is the result of letting grace and truth operate in our lives. Acceptance. That's the key of bringing good and bad together. We have got to stop trying to live in a way that keeps good away from bad. That separation sets up all kinds of problems because life is just simply not that way. I'm not that way. You're not that way. Others are not that. The world is not that way. All is a mixture of good and bad. And when we attempt to separate it and focus all on good or all on bad, then we're choosing to live in a way that is not going to work. Changes that will bring healing are the kind of changes that we learn how to accept good and bad in ourselves and others and in the world. Now, chapter 12 in the book outlines some of the problems we develop when we fail to accept good and bad together. In other words, when we choose to operate in a mindset of good or bad or all or nothing, where what kind of problems began to take place. And chapter 12 is the one that highlights those problems. And I think some of these are worth mentioning, not to beat anyone over the head with them, but to underscore the importance of changing our mindset from either or to both and when it comes to good and bad and real and the ideal. When we fail to accept good and bad together, and we live in an ongoing battle between the real and the ideal, we can develop problems with perfectionism and idealism. Perfectionism is the struggling to be perfect. Now, I'll tell you, I have struggled with that in my life. In my struggle to be perfect, in my struggle to be someone that is just like Jesus but made that way by my own hands, I became very, very legalistic. I was a living, breathing, modern-day Pharisee. Perfectionism comes into your life when you began to try to separate good and bad and not live with them together. And idealism was another one that I struggle with. Idealism is the refusal to see any bad that really is there, or idealism is at least trying to ignore the bad like it's not there. And I've done plenty of that as well. Here's another one. Failure to accept good and bad together can develop an inability to tolerate badness, weakness, or negative feelings. Depression and anxiety and panic and even rage can also be byproducts of this internal conflict between the real and the ideal. And some folk find themselves believing that they are all bad and can do nothing but wrong. And then others see themselves as all good and could never do anything wrong. The ones who see themselves as all bad are constantly apologizing. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I mean, they'll even see two people get into an argument and they'll turn to their friend and say, I'm so sorry. They have nothing to do with the argument, but they're apologizing for it. And then there's others who see themselves all good, and no matter what wrong they do, they would never admit it, nor will you ever hear them say, I'm sorry. Probably the most obvious result of this all or nothing thinking, this inability to bring good and bad together, is the trouble that it creates in relationships. As long as things are ideal in a relationship, everything is all good. But the moment real life bleeds through, and beloved it will, the relationship is seen as bad then. And if effort to remove the bad or change it or bring it back into goodness, if that all fails, then the relationship is seen as doomed, and plans are often made to just move on. Good and bad just cannot exist together, so the relationship is either one or the other. Okay, so these are some of the things that come when we can't get good and bad together, when we can't get a mindset that brings those two together, when we hold on to a view of life that is either all good or all bad, all or nothing, whether it's we're focusing all on the ideal or focusing just on the real. When we're holding on to that kind of message, there's many problems that will come as a result of that. So how do we get good and bad back together? What is the work we need to do to make this change that brings healing? Well, Dr. Henry Cloud suggests, the first thing that he suggests is that we practice, he suggests the practice of confession. Confession takes the bad that has been buried in the darkness of my life, and it brings it to the light to be met with grace and acceptance. Confession to God brings the bad into the relationship with Him. It presents it to Him for cleansing and healing by Him. Confession to others who love us and are safe. And beloved, listen to that condition. Confession to others who love us and are safe people, not confession just to anyone. Gives us the opportunity to receive the grace of God from those who represent Him, who are incarnational representatives of His truth, of His grace, of His love, and of His presence. Gives us an experience, a chance, an opportunity to experience His grace in that place where we are confessing something bad. So he suggests, first of all, that we learn to practice the discipline of confession to God and to those who are saved, to bring the bad out into the light. But secondly, Dr. Cloud suggests the practice of forgiveness. Now, beloved, let me just stop right here and say that we could spend probably 3 or 4 Wednesday nights, maybe a month of Wednesday nights just talking about forgiveness. I would do seminars on forgiveness in different churches. They would invite me to come speak, or I would even use that topic for a retreat. And I would often start out and say, okay, now here's what I want to ask. When you forgive someone, what are the practical steps you take to get to forgiveness? And I would get blank stares. I was speaking to Christians. My understanding is that, and I'm not saying I am one, but I'm understanding that we're supposed to be at a professional level at forgiveness. We're supposed to be really good. In fact, I think if I read the Bible right, we're supposed to be the best ones at it in the world. Forgiveness. Because we have experienced profound, immeasurable forgiveness. Anyway, Dr. Cloud suggests that one of the ways that we begin to bring good and bad back together is we practice forgiveness. This involves getting in touch with the depth of our own forgiveness, the bad that we've been forgiven of, as well as offering forgiveness to others who have brought bad into our lives, brought harm into our lives. If we don't practice forgiveness, the other option is then bitterness and holding a grudge. And bitterness and holding a grudge forever binds you to the one who hurt you. It doesn't make sense. Forgiveness breaks the cords of those bindings. Yes, now, beloved, it is a process. There is a piece of forgiveness that's instantaneous. That instantaneous piece is when I decide that I'm going to go to the city of forgiveness. I'm going to get there. I'm going to take whatever steps, I'm going to take whatever road or path it requires for me to get to the city of forgiveness. That's instantaneous. But the journey to forgiveness is a process. It takes time and it takes intentionality. It is necessary if we are going to learn to live with good and bad together. Forgiveness is a necessary piece. Number 3, Dr. Cloud recommends that we find a way to process negative feelings. Most of the time, when it comes to negative feelings, we just bury them or we ignore them. Now, beloved, all feelings are valid. It's what we do with them that determines what is good or bad. But all feelings are valid. But feelings that are not faced and processed, I guarantee you, will ambush you at some point. They will come out sideways, and all of a sudden you're dealing with something that you completely weren't expecting. Anger and fear and sadness must be owned, not disowned. And owning them, it means that we are processing them, we are facing them, we are doing something with them so that they don't harm us or others, like journaling or talking to a friend, and if need be, talking to a professional. Seeking to know what your feelings mean is a very valuable exercise to help process feelings, especially negative ones. Feelings are like the lights that come on your dashboard. If you ignore the beeping light or the flashing light on your dashboard, what's going to happen sooner or later? Something's going to quit working. It's the same thing is true for human beings. Finding a way to process feelings, especially negative ones, helps us begin to bring together good and bad. Number 4, Dr. Cloud recommends prayer. And what he's meaning by that is that we learn to bring our real self into the conversation and presence of God. When we're conversing with Him, that we bring our real self. It's not that we gear up and use flowery language. Oh God, Thou art mighty. But we be a real person with Him, and we work to have real conversation, and we tell Him what's really on our heart and minds. And we wait and listen to see if He wants to share what's really on His heart and mind. Prayer. And number 5, now I've mentioned 1 is that we practice confession. 2, we practice forgiveness. 3, find a way to process negative feelings. 4, prayer. And number 5, that we rework our ideal, what we think is ideal and what is really real, that we rework that from time to time. We sift through it so that there isn't anything that's becoming unrealistic or false in those places. Where my ideal isn't becoming unrealistic, or my real is really drifting into something that's not real or fake or false. That every so often that we rework those so that what we're really bringing together when we bring together the ideal and the real is real stuff, not fake stuff, not unrealistic stuff, not stuff that's unattainable, not stuff that came from our family dynamics or the things that have happened to us in life, and that we're bringing real stuff, honest stuff, authentic and genuine stuff, not stuff that is drifted into something that isn't quite honest. Rework your ideal and real from time to time. Number 6, keep tabs on the relationship between the real and ideal. Watch out for any denial or judging or condemning. Watch for places that need acceptance and grace in that relationship between the ideal and the real. And number 7, practice loving the less than ideal in yourself and others. Practice loving the less than ideal in yourself and others. And that takes some guts. That takes some mojo. Often what we want to do is hate that part of us. We want to condemn it. We want to have nothing to do with it. But coming to love the less than ideal in myself and in others helps me begin to bring the reality of good and bad into a real kind of existence in my life. Those are the 7 things that I recommend, Dr. Cloud recommends, and I recommend to you. Well, beloved, that's sort of the chapter. But let me end with a story just to bring the point of the chapter together. Her name was Margaret. She was a member of the first little church that I pastored. She was probably in her 70s, and she was a bit controlling and bossy. In fact, committees didn't mean much to her. She was in charge, even if her name was not on the committee in charge of that particular thing. Most people didn't like her because of that. As her pastor, I asked to come out to the farmhouse and visit with her and her husband when I first got there, and making all the rounds of visiting people who were in the church. And so I made an appointment with her to come out and visit her and her husband at their farm. We set a time, and then I went. And she greeted me at the door and then invited me to her table for some coffee and made some excuse for her husband not being there. The visit was good, but I could tell she was nervous about something. And as the time was approaching for me to go, she suddenly just started crying. As I tried to comfort her, she began to spill out words of pain and agony about her husband's alcoholism, which I knew nothing about. And I am not sure anyone else did either. She told me of her deep shame and sadness over his struggle with this addiction. And I listened, realizing that I was hearing things that no other human had taken the time to hear. Beloved, from that day forward, when I would hear someone in the church criticize Margaret for being bossy or controlling, I would think, oh, if you only knew, you wouldn't think that. Oh, beloved, if you only knew, if you only would look and listen and love, then room could be made for both and life wouldn't be made to fit into small categories that are either or. Well, beloved, thank you for being with us tonight. I hope that there has been something here that was meant for you, that it spoke to you, that it had something, some kind of power, some kind of opening for you that you know this God meant for you to have this. And then, beloved, as always, when we're coming to an end of a study and I'm asking you to watch for what was highlighted for you, what stood out for you, what meant the most to you, then the real question then becomes, what are you going to do with it? So I hope you do something with it. Blessings to you, and I hope you have a great week. I look forward to being with you again next Wednesday. Bye-bye.